All right, this time we have Peak Performance, which is an interesting episode because it has what is uh, in universe a Federation training exercise that gets interrupted by Ferengi. I'm genuinely not sure which would be the A plot or the B plot here. The training exercise plus Ferengi, or the thing with the Zakdorn individual. See, this one would be Cerna Karami. Now, Karami's role here is strategic analysis of the efforts of the participants. It's like, oh, I thought that was a bad strategic move, or I think this would be a good strategic move. However, they actually portray Karami as being so smug and self-confident that he's actually a little over sure of himself, which means that he overlooks certain strategic options that someone who was less laser focused might actually employ. This actually comes up twice in the episode. I'll get to that later. In terms of what you could actually use for a TTRPG, well, the plot hook is simple. You have a combat training simulation. This is actually a PvP scenario where it's Riker versus Picard. That is something that makes it very interesting because of the fact that if you were doing this in a TTRPG, that means you might have some of the players on Team A and some of the players on Team B trying to beat each other. And that, hey, maybe that would be fun. The arrival of the Ferengi to interrupt things was only actually a serious issue because of the fact that for the purposes of this training exercise, they wanted to ensure that no one would actually be able to be injured. Therefore, they took special precautions in order to prevent the two vessels from being able to fire real weapons at each other, which, okay, I can understand the logic here, but the description of the methodology, yeah. See, they're actually firing weapons. It's just that the weapons are somehow set to have such a low power setting that it does no real damage, but also at the same time, there's some sort of safety interlock to prevent them from accidentally firing at normal power, and they can't just turn off the safety interlock. Don't understand that. The actual episode is like, oh, it was basically just like a hand wave of like, oh, well, we can't do that. Anyway, though, the Kohlrami plot is kind of interesting in that it goes heavily into the whole metagame concept, where Strategema, a game which does not have a real counterpart because the episode does not discuss the rules, it shows people moving colored squares around in a three-dimensional grid using these weird glove things. The way they're moving their fingers suggests that the reason for the weird gloves is so that you actually have like 20 or so control surfaces in the gloves, and moving your finger left, right, up, down activates a different control surface. Why on earth a game like this would need that many control surfaces, I have no idea. It's something that old sci-fi, having digital games in the fictional universe would often do. But in real life, people decided early on that simple controls were better. At any rate, though, since we have no idea what the rules of Strategema are, actually understanding the strategic importance of Kohlrami's claims and the relative ease at which Kohlrami wins is vague at best. Anyway, though, so having players engage in something like that with an NPC, sure. That is actually the sort of thing that would be a great way to do like a skill check. It's like, hey, sure, it's skill check, but you need to, get a ridiculously high target number in order to actually make it. The interesting thing is that Data does 2 matches against Kohlrami. One in which Data lost, despite not being able to understand why. Because Data pursued what he felt was the absolute best strategy anyone could possibly use. And Kohlrami already knew a counter strategy. You see, the problem with Data is that he wasn't creative in how he was playing Strategema, and thus he used a strategy that he had looked up in a database and one that Kohlrami was already familiar with. So Kohlrami correctly anticipated every one of Data's moves before he even made it, and created a counter strategy that literally shut out Data from any possible hope of victory. In the rematch, Data decided to force an unending stall, which eventually annoyed Kohlrami to the part where Kohlrami gave up and conceded the match, because he'd actually managed to force Kohlrami into a position where Kohlrami couldn't make progress. And that was not something that Kohlrami was used to seeing. Because again, true Strategema grandmasters are playing to win, not playing to create an unending draw. Anyway, so overall, this was something kind of cool. In that it wasn't an episode with a big bad. It was an episode with an annoyance and some action, but it was an action against something that's really a minor threat. The thing is, though, is that overall it's actually a very fun thing, because you see people do stuff, try to do creative methods of outthinking the enemy. And they do have a few continuity errors, like the whole thing of Worf tricking the Enterprise into thinking that there's a Dederidex attacking them. Worf did that because he was hacking into the Enterprise computer and creating false sensor images from the inside of the Enterprise's computer. Because as the Enterprise security chief, he had all of these security codes to do stuff like that. And that's not something that you can do against a random enemy. However, they do that later on the Ferengi. How? Some games have done a similar trick where it's not a computer hack, but it's actually creating a fake sensor image, which is kind of like an inverted cloaking device. Instead of making something appear to not be there, you make something that's not there appear to be there, using something akin to holographic technology, but not using a standard holomatrix. Because it's a sensor ghost, not a physical thing you can see necessarily. Anyways, though, the Ferengi decide to run for it when uh, there is a actual counterattack, and then they get to the final part of the Data versus Karami thing, where Data just does a draw. Oh, also, it specifies that Karami didn't give up until Data had managed to draw to the point where they had taken a total of 33,000 moves. How many hours were they playing? I don't know. Oh, yeah. 33,000 moves. And, it's said to be a record-setting game. I forgot that part. Like the longest longest game of Strategema that Karami had ever played. Okay. Anyway, so yeah. This is one of those things that'll be like a fun side mission sort of thing in a TTRPG. You have the crew doing stuff. They don't necessarily have a major threat. They're just doing stuff. Also, the backstory of the Zakdorn race is insane. Who has known these guys for 9,000 years? Yeah, that. The Zakdorn is said to have had uh, the greatest strategic minds in the galaxy for 9,000 years. What part of galactic interrelations actually goes back 9,000 years? Because this would seemingly mean that the Zakdorn have been an interstellar species for 9,000 years and have been regarded as brilliant strategists by whoever they were interacting with as their galactic neighbors for 9,000 years. What? I don't get that. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's a throwaway background plot point that makes no sense when you try to put it into the big picture. Actually, that's something that I would caution GMs against is don't just talk up a bad guy for the sake of talking up a bad guy, because you might regret it later. Alrighty, well, that's my thoughts on this particular episode. Very interesting. Something that you could have fun with. I wouldn't necessarily make an exact copy of this, but hey, there's ideas you can play with. A lot of ideas you can play with. And that's what we do for now. See you next time.